Welcome back to Mindful Serenity Yoga, or Waking Up in a Busy World. I'm going to continue with our questions from the jar. And I think we're approaching question 36 or 37. Let's see. So let's see. I'm going to dig into the bottom again, kind of grab one. Set my timer. And I'll read the question. How do we make sense of the pandemic on a metaphysical level? How do we make sense of the pandemic on a metaphysical level? I'll take a deep breath. How do we make sense of the pandemic on a metaphysical level? I guess the word metaphysical is tripping me up, and I think the person means, I'm not sure if they mean on a supernatural level, or the less obvious level, or the level that goes beyond form. Physical actually means beyond the physical, beyond form, so spiritual level, greater understanding level. How do we make sense of the pandemic on that level? I think we first have to understand it on a physical level. What is a pandemic? A pandemic, we usually see some type of disease originating from some type of microorganism, usually a virus in this case, as it was in many of the other pandemics we've had in the world, that affects basically affects more than one continent, so it's traveling over oceans from one continent to the other. And with all our continents, we see this influx of this virus. Actually, I don't know if there's any cases in Antarctica of the pandemic, but you know what I mean. So we do see it from continent to continent, and that's what creates a pandemic. How do we understand it on the physical level? Is that it's simply a virus, a coronavirus, has spread from one individual to the next. Because it is a very virulent virus, it's a very strong, easily spread virus with a short incubation period. It was able to be transmitted from one human to the next, and it spread very quickly. Of course, such a virus is concerning for those individuals, especially who are high risk, immunocompromised, aged, elderly, or very young. Anytime a virus like that, we're concerned about those individuals. But it has been affecting people of all ages, and in some cases has led to a death, ICU admission and ventilation and death. But what does that mean on a metaphysical level? Maybe I should also look at it on a societal level before I get to metaphysical. On the societal level, it has great impact on us economically. Leads to isolation as we try to get the virus under control. Many people have found themselves isolated. We found ourselves cut off from the things that we became very dependent on, like being able to go out and to restaurants and social gatherings. And it has also led to a disruption of the flow of money into economies that were dependent on commercialism and whatnot. So it has that great effect on us. The whole entire world is affected by it, right? So what the heck does that mean in the metaphysical level? I'm actually skirting around that because I don't know how to answer it. In the metaphysical level, in essence, what could it mean? Well, I look at it as almost like a wake-up call, and not that the universe intended it to be a wake-up call, or that, planted the virus on us so that we'd all wake up to the understanding that we need more time alone. But I saw it as a wake-up call for most of us to stop running, to stop and stay still, to recognize that we had to sit with what was rather than run from what was, to take accountability for our actions, our karma, to to look inside ourselves for the greater answer and understanding. And for many people, I think this was probably a time where they woke up, where they became enlightened, or took the steps towards enlightenment, because, you know, they were forced to sit in a room alone, quietly, like so many of us don't want to do. But I also see it as a way of, especially because it's a pandemic going from one continent to another, it's a way for us to change our perceptions about the world and stop seeing it in terms of a map, which has clear, distinct lines around one country and another, one nation and another, one continent and another, and see the universality of this world. We're all connected. A pandemic does not see border lines and does not stop at the border of one country, you know. It does not see the border lines, does not see these distinctions and these ideas that we adhere to in our mind about, you know, us and ours and theirs and theirs. I think it was a great wake-up call for that, to help us look at universality a little bit more clearly. You know, when we talked about vaccination, only a small percentage of the world got vaccinated the way it should. There's large continents like Africa that are still not even getting their first vaccines, because definitely harder to get to those remote areas with a vaccine that's so fragile. But at the same time, it was because it was not priority. Nations were looking after nations, their own nations, and really defining those borders around themselves so that they could protect the people that were inside them. Not seeing the wholeness of this universe, not seeing the wholeness of this planet, not seeing all of us as connected as one. And with a pandemic, you can't do that, because like it goes from continent to continent. If we don't vaccinate Africa, the pandemic is never going to be over. It's going to keep mutating. The virus is going to keep mutating, albeit it is getting weaker and weaker the more it mutates. But it's going to keep mutating into different strands. That's what viruses do, and it's keep going to cross borders and whatnot, because the virus doesn't recognize the borders that we're adhering to. So we really need to look at the whole world and vaccinate the whole world if we want to put an end to this virus. That's just the way it is. So I think the pandemic, if you want to think in terms of metaphysical, whether or not it was intended as such by the universe or by God or whatever, to teach us these things, it was an opportunity to get us to stop and rest and to look at how we're living our lives and to reflect inward rather than outward. It was also an opportunity for us to put away our distinctions, especially around nationalities, countries, continents, and look at the whole planet as one whole. The whole planet was crying out to be cared for. The human species, whether you divide that species into several different races or not, you have one species. And one species was at the risk of being annihilated. You know, if the virus was any stronger and we did not take the precautions we did, it could have annihilated all of us. So there may be a virus out there in the future that can do that. So we need to think in terms of ourselves as one species, and not only one species, beings belonging to one planet. So we go even beyond the human species to the beingness of all as earthlings, so that we can get a better grasp on what's real and what's true. Because, you know, like the virus did not see borders. The virus did not see these cutoffs between me and you, to see the difference between me and the difference between you. It just saw a human species that was a viable host for it so that it could enter and do what it had to do. And the economic crisis that's about to follow is going to lead to some suffering for sure. It's going to take time to reestablish ourselves and those ideas we had that were so important, you know, financial wealth and success and business and commercialism. Maybe it'll be the end to that to some degree, or diminish that, but maybe not. Maybe most of us will become minimalists after this and live lives, spiritual lives, rather than lives as capitalists, greedy capitalists. I don't know. But for sure, the metaphysical cause of this virus was to teach us, I think, whether it was intended or not, to look at one another with eyes of connectedness rather than separation, and to reflect inward to who we really are, to that one essence we all share, that the virus could never get at, you know. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. I hope it made sense. Thanks for listening. Namaste.